Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Johanna Bond, one of the vice presidents here at the Middlesex Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for the anatomy of a healthy boundary. Lord knows we all need that in our life. I'm going to turn this over to our fantastic chairman of the WLCN, Lauren Middleton, to do the introductions. But thank you again for joining us. Please remain on mute. If you do have a question, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom. I know Karen will absolutely take your questions when she has a chance. Or you can use the chat function and we'll be monitoring those. So thanks again for joining us. Lauren.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Anatomy of a Healthy Boundary. This is our March seminar for the Women's Leadership Collaborative Network. We're very happy to see Karen today. Before we start, I'm just going to go over some quick events that the Chamber is hosting in March and April. This Friday, we have the Legislative Leadership Series event with Senate Majority Leader Bob Duff, and that's from 9 to 10 on Zoom. Monday, April 5th, we have a key bank workshop series called The Skilled Communicator from 9 to 11 on Zoom as well. And then Thursday, April 8th, a fun team building happy hour, Zappy hour, that's going to be from 5 to 6 p.m. And then we are going to be planning another exciting meeting in April that will be announced soon. I am actually going to kick it over to Ellen Ornato. She's a member of our steering committee and a co-owner of the Boulder Company, and she's going to introduce Karen.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here this morning. Karen Anderson, I've known Karen for quite a long time and have watched her evolve as a powerful public speaker, as a leader in the conversation about vulnerability and really looking inside and loving every part of yourself as access to figuring out how to set healthier boundaries. Karen has written several books that have very long titles, so I'm going to encourage you to go to her website, but it's all about this conversation of how do we dig into how we were raised and the people around us to figure out what boundaries we naturally set or don't set, and how we hold ourselves in a higher space so that we can put ourselves first to serve others as part of it. Tell me if I got that right or wrong, Karen. Karen was recently featured in the New York Times as a subject matter expert, and she is certified with Brene Brown's Dare to Lead as a professional coach, and she's also got an executive coaching certification and lots of other coaching certifications and credentials in the world of guiding others to conversations about themselves. When I texted her this morning, I said, so what title should I give you? And she said, oh, maybe Goddess of Boundaries and Service to Women, Healing the Mother Wound. So we're going to learn, I'm sure, what the mother wound is all about. And I will also tell you that if you play words with friends, Karen is very likely to kick your butt. And I encourage you to engage in that endeavor. Like, try to be Karen Anderson at Words with Friends. So with no further comment from me, I introduce my friend Karen Anderson.
Thank you, Ellen. It's really nice to be here. And this is obviously one of my very favorite subjects in the whole wide world. And what I would love to hear from people in the chat if they want to share as we go, and that would be, what are the things that hold you back or get in the way of setting the boundaries that you want to set, and that way I can answer questions as we go or at the end, whatever works. So Ellen didn't really focus on this too much in her introduction, but I want to share that I came to my boundary setting expertise, skills, experience, etc., through the relationship I have with my mom. And mother-daughter relationships is my area of expertise, and it is something that I continue to work on personally, and I help lots of women in that regard. And so I want to share a little story that sort of sets the stage for how I came to understand boundaries the way I do and the way that I teach them. So this is like maybe 15 years ago, and it was when I was sort of still very much in a reactive place with my mom, and we were driving somewhere. I don't remember where we were driving, but I was driving. It was my car, and again, like she lit up her cigarette in the car, and I immediately opened all the windows and like huffed and puffed about that. And she immediately rolled the windows back up, and I growled at her and she growled at me, and we were both angry and upset. And I remember later venting to my husband and venting to my friends and anyone who would listen. She doesn't respect me. She doesn't respect my boundaries. And again, it was kind of interesting how I was, wanting to have better boundaries with her, but not knowing how. And we had another car trip planned coming up, and I decided to just basically ask her and say, hey, Mom, if you want to smoke, that's great. I'll stop the car. You can get out and smoke. And she said, okay. And it was like, oh, that was really easy. And that gets to one of the things that I think gets in the way of people setting boundaries, and it's that we judge other people's behavior as bad and wrong. Right? We're trying to control somebody else, and like, especially if it's an adult, we're trying to control another adult's behavior. And when we approach boundary setting with that, like, judgment or moral superiority, right, that their behavior is bad and wrong, it gets in the way of setting what I call a healthy, mature boundary. So what's interesting, though, is that scenario with me and my mom in the car, knowing my mom, she could have said no, right? Like, I'll smoke if I want to smoke. And if that was the case, right, it never did come to that. But, in hindsight, I thought, well, what would I have done if she had done that? What if she, and it just came to me that, next time there's a place that we're going to go in the car together, she can take her car, I'll take mine. So in the end, what healthy, mature boundaries are about is always our behavior, right? And because ultimately is really the only behavior that we can control. And so the idea that I was taking control of what I could control, which was my behavior, and not expecting her to change her behavior, made such a huge difference. But there are a lot of things that get in the way, and I see that people are, a lot of people are commenting on the things that hold them back. And number one is patriarchal conditioning, basically, right? And somebody here, who is it here? I just went back and forth. Being mean, Anna, yes. We think it was women, we're conditioned, right, to not be mean, to not be rude, offensive, hurtful. We're putting ourselves last. We're not allowed to have preferences. We're not supposed to be, or we're supposed to be nice, and boundaries aren't nice. We think that we don't deserve them, or that we're not allowed to have them. So that conditioning, which is thousands of years in the making, right, that gets in the way of setting boundaries, because when we think, gosh, I'd like to set a boundary, it triggers something in our nervous system that it might be dangerous to do so. And that is actually the second thing that gets in the way of setting our boundaries is our nervous systems, right? Our nervous systems go on high alert when we're about to do something that our nervous system perceives as dangerous. And so, when we're triggered, and I know somebody else brought up people pleasing, when we're triggered, right, it's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. I know in some circles, people are aware that fawning is the fourth F now that is being talked about in trauma circles. But you know, fawning is basically people pleasing, and it's not something that we do like on purpose or that we're like consciously thinking about. It is a way to keep us and others safe, is you know, we're trying to make sure everyone around us is happy and okay. So we're people pleasing. So yeah, our nervous systems can get in the way. And in the handout that I have for anyone who's interested later, I have some very simple practices that can help you expand the capacity of your nervous system so that you're not feeling so triggered. It helps you, these practices help you calm that triggered feeling. And interestingly, I'm having a little bit of a freeze response this right as we're speaking. What I was going to say is that women tend to default into freeze or fawn rather than fight or flight. And that is because fight and flight tends not to work well for us. Something else that gets in the way is believing that other people have to respect or honor our boundaries in order for them to be valid, right? Or in order for us to be able to have them, is that other people have to agree or respect what we're doing. And really, the best news of all is that they don't, because if they did, we'd be waiting a long time. So really, we're the only people who, we're the only ones who have to honor and respect our boundaries. Lack of clarity can get in the way, right? When we're not clear about what it is our preferences are in any given situation, that leads to explaining or negotiating. And, you know, the more we explain or the more we aren't really sure of what our preference is in the given moment, the more it will come across as negotiation, or that, you know, this is open for discussion. And sometimes depending on the relationship and who we're talking with, you know, there could be some negotiation, but most often the clarity that we have is what it's actually kinder, right? Brene Brown says clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So the clearer we are with our preference and with our request, which I'm going to go into the anatomy in a second, but the clearer we are with that, the kinder it is for those around us. And finally, not understanding what boundaries actually are can get in the way. And so that gets now to, you know, the anatomy of a healthy, mature boundary. So there's three parts to the healthy boundary. The first is the request. And the request is asking another person to stop doing whatever there's doing that crosses your boundary. And what's interesting is you don't necessarily have to communicate this part. I mean, you can, but again, this is something that you can play with. So the first part is the request. The second part is the action or consequence. And that is, you're going to let them know what you will do if they don't want to honor your request. And those two parts, those two pieces are really the, I would say they're the required parts for it to be healthy and mature. And this third part is optional, but it can be very helpful. And that is the value or the benefit. And so you want to be clear about the value or benefit that the boundary will have on the relationship, right? It's because a lot of times people think about boundaries as what you want to push out or keep out, right? You know, I don't want this in my space. We can also look at boundaries as what we want to bring in or what we want to cultivate in our relationships. And that's, I mean, if you've ever done any kind of values work, values work will help you identify what's important to you in a relationship, and you can then lean on those values in support of your boundaries, right? Your values are your boundaries are your values in action. So so there's the request, the action, and the value or the benefit. And so here's some examples, okay? And these are really simple ones, but I think they get the point across, right? The request, please don't yell at me. The action, if you continue to yell, I'm going to leave or hang up the phone or get off the Zoom call. And the value or the benefit is, if you stop yelling, I'll be better able to concentrate on what you're trying to tell me. Now, in this case, right, if you're really clear in your mind, you don't necessarily have to communicate those words. You can, your actions can speak for you if they're clear. So someone's yelling, right? You decide you don't want to be around yelling. And you're like, hey, I'll see you later, right? Like, again, you're not judging. You're not saying you're being rude or you shouldn't yell. You're just saying, hey, that's not what I want to be around right now, so I'm going to leave. Another one that is, this is sort of one of my personal ones, is how people communicate with us, right? And we have so many different ways. There's phone, there's text, there's messages, there's email, right? Regular mail, if anyone's even still using that. But I've had to set boundaries with clients, and mostly clients in this regard, but the best way to reach me is email, right? And if you text me or send me messages on Facebook, I'm not going to respond. That's the request, is, basically telling them this is the best way. This is how I would appreciate if you would, contact me this way. If you don't contact me that way, it's likely I'm not going to respond. And the value or the benefit here is that it's easier for me to keep track of our communication this way. Because the reason I set this boundary in the first place was because I had a client who was sending me, it's also then incumbent on me to not give my text number if I don't want people to be texting me. A lot of the boundaries that are really the most powerful are the ones that we have with ourselves. Here's one that is for a lot of adult daughters, and it's the fact that their moms are calling them all the time or expect to be called all the time. And, here's the request. And again, it's said in not so much of a request, but it's a very clear, a clear statement. I'd love to chat with you once a week for half an hour. If you call me more than that, I won't answer the phone. The value benefit. This way, I'll be able to give you my undivided attention. Right? It's so simple. And really, at the bottom line for any of these, right, if you're looking at values, right, is respect. Right? It's respect for yourself, and and when you are respecting yourself, you can't help but extend that respect to the other person. So the sort of, what do you call it? What's the word? Equation. It's the request plus action plus value or benefit equals healthy, mature boundaries. And there are, a lot of, I want to actually look at some of these just so I'm not going to repeat. Feeling like I'm responsible for the happiness of others. Yeah, well, logically, you're not, right? Logically, we know, but our body, our nervous system is like, nope, right? If other people aren't happy, my body perceives a threat. So I need to make sure. And I think it's actually such a relief to understand that this isn't like some sort of like moral failing on your part, that you want to keep other people happy. Like there's something wrong with you. Like, oh, I shouldn't want to keep everybody. I know I can't, but for some reason, like I feel compelled to. It's because your nervous system is saying if everybody's not happy, we're not safe. So the way I like to approach when we're in that sort of like people pleasing, like, oh my gosh, I have to make everybody happy here, is to say, what can I do right now in my for my nervous system to take care of that, to take care of me in this moment so that I'm calmer, right? Everybody's different. I mean, some people do yoga, some people do breathing, some people do, I mean, there's all kinds of practices, right? To help calm the nervous system. I'm going to demonstrate one right now. It's very, very simple and it takes like 2 seconds. Okay. I'm just going to simply twist at the waist and at my neck, and I'm going to turn like this. I'm going to cut my eyes as far over to the side as I can. Doing that basically tells your nervous system, like, everything's okay. There's no tigers behind me, right? I mean, because that's basically what our nervous system is saying. Something's not, like, it might not be safe. So doing that just a couple of times a day, like when you remember to do it, even if you're not like thinking that anything is wrong, that can help. That can help start to expand the capacity a little bit, that, other people not being happy is okay. Like it's not, no one's going to die. Things, yes, from being mean, feeling a lot of guilt. So what happens when we feel guilt, or the reason that we feel guilt, is because we think we're not supposed to have boundaries, right? Like guilt is, we're found guilty in a court of law. We've done something wrong. Here's it's like a little mindset trick, but think about it for a second. Is having boundaries against the law? No, right? So there's nothing to be guilty for. You're not guilty, right? It's just simply a way to trick your mind. Like we just automatically think if I'm setting boundaries, then I'm doing something wrong. Thinking I need help. So helplessness, this is like actually one of my my defaults, right? Helplessness is actually, again, a nervous system default. It's that freeze, more than fawn, but it's a freeze response when our bodies are perceiving some sort of danger. And again, we're not aware necessarily that there's danger, but our bodies perceive it. And we can default into a freeze state, which often looks like it's sort of like when there are emotional cues and clues that go in noticing when we're having these nervous system responses, and just being aware that this is what's happening can help. So you might feel a little confused, you might feel a little overwhelmed, or maybe a lot overwhelmed. And then sort of moving into that hopeless, helpless feeling, which if in a physical, like, our nervous systems govern physical responses as well. And an extreme would be like sort of collapsing or fainting. So that feeling of helplessness, or that I need help, right? In a lot of cases, we do need help. I mean, and that's more of a conscious thing, but the judgment of helplessness it's just being able to notice, like, oh, this is where I'm going. This is where, my body is feeling unsafe. And so it could just be a matter of asking for help, but realizing that you're not actually in danger. And again, like some of the practices that I share There's one in particular where it's chanting a syllable. It's very much like Om in yoga, but when you chant, it helps bring you out of that freeze response, and it helps bring back online sort of more rational, creative thought. So you're coming out of that freeze or that helplessness. Yeah, because everything shuts down when we're in that mode, right? Where like we can't access our logical, creative minds at that point. Setting specific hours for work and not feeling the need to get back to the client immediately. So setting specific hours, right? That's up to you. You get to decide what your hours are. And I'm wondering if there's, I mean, a lot of times, is it like a procrastination thing? Yeah, see, like it's so funny too, because like procrastination is one of those things that we tend to judge ourselves for, right? Like, oh God, I'm so bad because I'm procrastinating. But again, it's like we have, I think we're all learning this. We are all much more neurologically diverse than we were all once led to believe. And so a lot of times procrastination is just a sign or a signal that, again, it might sound like I'm bringing this up a lot, but like that your nervous system is sensing some danger around whatever it is that you are procrastinating around, right? Like maybe there's something about setting specific hours that doesn't feel safe. And what can help is, instead of thinking of procrastination as being the opposite of productivity, you can look at, how can I engage with this, right? Like engagement is what helps bring us out of, like, again, sort of like a curiosity, engaging with, rather than thinking, oh, I have to do this because I have to be productive. I don't know if that word engagement, the distinction there is helpful. But yeah, and the feeling of the need to get back to the client immediately, right? Like I totally get that. It's like, oh, I'm supposed to respond immediately, but you can give yourself, you can let it set a spell, right? There's some mindset there that if I don't get back, something is going to go wrong, or they're not going to like me, or they're not going to, but again, like setting expectations with the client, right? I will get back within 24 hours, right? Getting clear on your boundary there is what's kind to the client. One of the things I do with my clients is I have a Google Doc where they can, we go back and forth, and I tell them, I said, it's not like I'm sitting at my computer 24/7 and going to respond, but like, I will hopefully respond within 24 hours on the week, and not on the weekends, or not after 5 p.m. And just knowing those parameters for yourself, right? It's kind to them. After setting a verbal boundary with a teenage daughter, continuing to engage in escalating back and forth banter rather than leaving it be. Yeah, so so maybe the boundary isn't 100% clear, right? Like I don't know if Becky is here and if she wants to talk about this directly.
Sure. Hi.
Hi.
So yeah, setting a boundary, like for example, you use the yelling, there's not going to be any yelling in this house. And then she'll be like, I'm not yelling, and then I'll respond to it as if I need to well, you are yelling right now. Can't you see that you're yelling? You know, so that type of just, I have a hard time. I feel mean if I just walk away. There's no yelling in this house or whatever is happening, and then just kind of leave it, you know. And I do like how you gave the value to that. And I feel like I don't do that, is say, you know, then I can actually understand what you're saying, or we can talk through it. If you're not yelling, which still might not get a good response. However, I have a hard time just saying something and leaving it, because there is always 100% of the time a retort that is probably something I want to respond to. Teenagers.
Yes. Well, again, like my expertise is in the adult daughter, right? Past the hormones, past all that. But so much can be done with body language, right? Like I often talk about the inner growl, and it you know, and it's funny too, because I use the example of a mama bear. And imagine that there's a mother bear, right? And she's off in the forest or whatever, and she's got her cubs, and the cubs are playing, and she's just had this big lunch, right? And she's sort of like sleepy, maybe she wants to take a nap, you know, drowsing, but she's aware, right? She's aware that the cubs are there, and she's, you know, sort of paying attention, but she's fully relaxed. She's in what would be called that rest and digest parasympathetic nervous system response, which again, the parasympathetic, in when we're sort of healthy and regulated, is rest and digest, you know, chilling out, relaxed. And then if we are triggered, that's where freeze comes in. That's where fawning comes in. But so she's, you know, she's just, you know, chilling there. And she's not worried about the cubs, right? Like she's not over there like, well, what if a predator comes along, or what if they go too far away? She doesn't like, she doesn't. And the reason that she's not worried is because she trusts that if something happens, right, her sympathetic nervous system, which is the foot on the gas, right? It's the, you know, it's the get up and go. It's the motivation. It's the like gathering of energy in our bodies, that like the cubs get too far away, she's up and she goes and brings them back. And I think what happens a lot of the time with humans is that we forget that we are also mammals, and that we have that ability to like, you know, the cub's in danger, I need to take action, right? Otherwise I don't. But like, what if, you know, like, what if what if she does happen to notice they're getting a little bit too far away, right? Or maybe there's a predator, but the predator is not like super close. Like she can growl, right? Like that, like being able to growl is like, you know, is a warning. It's a don't come closer, right? And I think this works great with with teenagers, because you're not going to necessarily literally growl, but like think about the body language of like you're going too far, right? What would it be like to sort of have your body language start to communicate that this is a little bit too much? And I've done this. I've actually I've done this with my mom when she's going too far for me, right? And it's just the slightest little bit of like turning away and like, you know, like sort of making a little bit of a tiny growl face. I know it sounds crazy, but it really works, because it sends signals, right? We're sending signals here with our body and with our energy. But when we're like in the midst of, you know, a back and forth and a, you know, you're yelling, no, right? Like we're you know, getting out of regulation. We're becoming dysregulated. right? And we're showing those around us that we're not in control anymore, right? And your daughter wants you to be in control, even though she will in a million years would never admit that, but she wants you to be in control, right? So like, I'm curious, just having said that, right? Like you also might have some judgments around what yelling means, right? So like it's rude to yell. And so I'm also wondering if like, you know, what might be the way of communicating to her where you're not judging her behavior. Is that helpful at all? And what boundary might you set if you're not judging her for yelling? Maybe, I mean, like, you know, yelling can actually be good for you. Right? It's a way that we express ourselves, right? And we're taught, like, obviously, that it's not okay to yell in public and all that kind of stuff. But actually, yelling and chanting and using our voices loudly is actually really healthy. So maybe like there's a way that she could channel that some other way.
And maybe if I can interrupt, Karen, maybe allowing her to yell and saying to do that, you know what, I'll walk away, but you got to do what you have to do. It's kind of respecting what she needs, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, remember, like we're animals. So deep programming that shows me that it's my job to take care of others before myself. It's just, yeah, it's the same thing, right? It's like it is deep programming. And if we think about it as like, oh God, it's deep programming, I'll never get over it. Like, how might we think about it instead? Right? Sometimes it's the like narrative that we have running through our head about what is, what this is. And then, then it becomes this impossible thing to overcome. Right? So like, how can you get creative with, like, again, it's like you logically, it's not your job, but your system is like, it's my job. Right? Just knowing that, like, how can you tell your system that no, actually, it isn't our job? And even though, yes, it feels like deep programming, maybe it's not that difficult. Right? Engage that what that does is help engage the more rational, creative part of your brain instead of going back into like the deep, scary, part that's just trying to survive. It would be really helpful to have some go-to responses when my nervous system goes to freeze or fawn. Perfect. So I showed you the twisting thing, right? These are things that you can do when, like, anytime. And I'll share another one, right? My name's Karen. It's Tuesday, March 23rd. It's 12:41 p.m. here in Southeastern Connecticut, and I'm sitting in my office in my house. And what I've just done is I've told my nervous system that I know where I am, I know who I am, right? I know that like everything around me it's okay. And that's just, again, such a really simple way to signal that you're aware. Doing this occasionally, again, it's like, I do it with my clients so often that I'm like, I'm practicing it all the time. So in the past year and a half, that's what I was saying before about, I was originally scheduled to do this talk in November of 2019 and it snowed and then COVID came. And in this past year, I have learned so much about the nervous system and about how to, and I've been using these tools with my clients so often that like, I've even noticed like my anxiety is way down, right? Like these tools have become just second nature for me, so that it doesn't mean like, it doesn't like, I actually froze in the middle of this earlier on in this Zoom call. I could feel myself just shutting down. And I'm like, because nervous systems are going to do what nervous systems are going to do, right? You don't have to make it mean that there's something wrong with us, or that they're like, that it has to be this embarrassing thing. So even just that, like even just acknowledging that human beings are going to be human, right? As long as we have nervous systems, this is what's going to happen. And, we all have experienced all kinds of traumas, small t traumas, big T traumas, chronic, small t traumas. I'm all about normalizing that, using the word trauma, talking about shame, talking about being embarrassed, talking about having I like dissociated for a few seconds there, right? Like normalize all of that. And I think that can just, that's like, to me, it's like been a huge part of my own puzzle, like my own work, is just being able to be a human instead of like trying to be a robot, or, some perfect woman. What's going on, Ellen?
I just had a question for you, Karen. I follow Karen on Facebook and encourage you to do that as well. Karen will very often post things that happen to her and what she makes them mean. And she goes through the process of sort of unwinding, why did I have that response and what does it mean? And one of the most powerful ones that I read recently was the conversation of, I love myself because I do this.
Yeah.
Instead of I love myself even though I do this, sort of that whole piece. So
I know we're sort of veering off boundaries, but like really it is all part of the same, it's all part of the same conversation. And more than anything, as I said, like being able to normalize these things actually helps with boundaries, right? Because I think a lot of the time, we're seeing boundaries as I have to protect myself, right? And obviously there are instances where we do. I mean, where there's abuse or violence or, literally behavior that's like not that we don't find healthy for us, right? We want to protect. But I also see it as like, it's also about respect, protect and respect, right? If we're walking around thinking, oh my God, I have to protect myself, it's sort of coming from that disempowered place. Whereas, seeing boundaries as it's like the clear definition of who we are, literally like our boundary, right? Which is made up of our physical self and the space around us and what we're comfortable with, but also then, what we value, right? And what we don't value. So the more clear we are about who we are, the definition, right? The clear, like the boundary, our physical boundary and our emotional, mental, spiritual boundary of that definition of who we are, the clearer we are, right? It's almost like at that point, our boundaries become energetic, right? With our daughters who are yelling at us, it's like, right? Nope, thank you. Right. And we don't have to be mean about it. We just sort of turn our bodies away. I'm not interested in that. Go yell, go out in the backyard and yell. It's fine. Right. There's a kindness there. Yeah. Facial cues. Yeah. And again, what's fascinating about our nervous systems, if you're love to do research, Google vagal nerve, the vagal nerve, or vagal polyvagal theory. the vagal nerve, right, is this nerve that runs basically from like the back of our brain, and it goes all the way down to our butthole, basically. And it like it has tentacles or like branches that go into our face and into all of our organs. And so as humans evolved out of like being, first there was like reptiles and and then mammals, but as mammals have evolved, the ability to have expression on our faces is directly linked to that vagus nerve and our nervous system and our ability to perceive, like if somebody's growling or if somebody's angry or if somebody's sad, like that is all like, that's part of it. And it's, what I love about it is that it takes the, like, oh, I have to be perfect. It's like, no, we're animals, right? We're able to have this affect for a reason, right? It serves us, and we can scan our environment. We can pay attention. How can you tell your nervous system when it's shouting unsafe, that in fact everything is okay? Yeah, like as I said, turning to look around you is one way. You can also sort of pay attention to what's happening in your environment and just let your eyes land on things that you notice. Just the act of doing that signals that, again, you're aware. The other thing too is that simply just sort of saying like, okay, system, I get that you feel unsafe. We're actually not unsafe. And it's okay, right? I don't have to, I think so often we think we have to shut down these uncomfortable emotions that we don't like, right? If you can just be with them. Like speaking of, we were talking about COVID earlier, before everybody joined and getting the shot. My husband was recently bitten by a dog, so he can't get the COVID vaccine because he has to get rabies vaccines. And I have had a lot of anxiety in the past around other people throwing up. So he's off getting his rabies shot. I'm off Googling what are the side effects. And of course, vomiting is like one of the top. I noticed I hadn't felt like serious anxiety in quite a while. But I read that, and all of a sudden I had all of this like signs that I was having, and it was weird because as I said, I haven't really felt this kind of anxiety in a while. It's like my heart started pounding, my throat started to feel like I couldn't swallow, my knees felt weak. I mean, all like, I'm like, yep, this is anxiety. But here was like the magical thing was like, oh, like these are just sensations in my body. Like he could come home, he could throw up. I won't like it. I might continue to feel these sensations, and okay, like that, and like being able to have that conversation with yourself can be so helpful. Like just sensations. Actually, him throwing up is like, I know logically that that's okay. By the way, he didn't throw up, he's fine. But like, like even if he had, I think it probably, like I might not have slept very well that night. Okay, it's okay, right? Everything will be okay. It's just sensations. Can you set boundaries when you're angry while maintaining respect for yourself and the other person? I love anger. And what's interesting about anger is that we will often shut it down because we think the anger in and of itself is unsafe. I mean, best practice is to let it set a spell before you set a boundary. Like what you might want to do in the moment of feeling anger, might be yelling or screaming or stamping or, punching or what, however it is that, you express anger. But again, like that anxiety, can you be like, can you identify the sensations of anger before you get to that point also understanding that not all the time, but sometimes anger it's the opposite of the parasympathetic. It's the sympathetic response. It's that fight energy, right? There's a threat. I'm going to deal with it by being angry, by fighting, right? And it's like that anger response. And the cues to that, right? Just like the cues of feeling confused and hopeless and helpless on the parasympathetic side. And again, the handout that I have explains all this, so you don't have to like, know it with me just talking about it. But on the sympathetic side, the cues that you're going into that kind of response would be irritation, annoyance, frustration, and then like it can go into like full-on rage, right? So it's like paying attention to the cues, like the mama bear, right? Like how much energy, how much do I need to apply in this moment? Do I need to go all on out like mama bear rage, clawing and killing and maiming, right? Or like, do I just need to like grab the cub by his foot and pull him back? Say, get over here, right? So it's like getting to know your own system. But yeah, best practice in terms of the boundary that you want to set, the boundary conversation, like later when you're sort of like calm down a bit, what is the request? What is the action that you would take in the future if the person doesn't want to honor your request? And, what is the value or benefit? Did I miss anything? Any other questions? It's funny, speaking of Facebook and things that I post, I posted something the other day about how the times that I am best able to express myself really super clearly are at like 2 o'clock in the morning in my dreams, or when I wake up and I'm like, I have all these wonderful ideas, and then, but when it comes to actually speaking, like but I'm no longer shaming myself for that. And as Ellen said, the concept of loving yourself or accepting yourself or respecting yourself because you are the way you are, rather than in spite of or even though, can
That's
make all
really
the difference.
powerful. That's really powerful because that goes to who we are authentically and actually being able to love ourselves despite or because of, who we are. That's really powerful stuff. Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, I mean, and the best part is when you do it, when you say something like, I love myself because I yelled at my daughter. Or I love myself because I had a freeze response in the middle of a Zoom call. Or I love myself because I didn't respond the way I actually wish I had.
That's hard.
It is hard, but it's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Because
you.
again, like, in a perfect world, which we don't live in yet, right? We would be operating, from this regulated place of being able to, respond instead of react. And we got to let humans be human, right? We don't have to, I don't have to be around my mom when she's smoking if I don't want to be, or I don't have to talk about politics if I don't want to talk, But other people if they like, hey, good for them. It feels really weird because like I can't hear anything. It's like normally I would hear people like,
That's why I'm talking to you, because it's like, trying to get your voice back.
So yeah, we have like three more minutes. Any more questions or anything? Be happy to. And I guess Lauren, or no, I don't remember who, somebody's going to send, I'll send the handout to the powers that be, and they will disseminate it to whoever wants it.
Karen, are there articles or places to go to get started on this journey of setting healthy boundaries? Is the worksheet the place to start to kind of think about?
Yeah, I'm always updating my worksheets, and I know some of the people who are on my mailing list, I sometimes include those worksheets there and people download them, but I'm always like updating. And so again, I am clearer in my communication via writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I actually prefer to consume information that way as well.
Thank you.
I actually also have a podcast, which I've kind of taken a break from, but I'll put all that in the handout so that people can find it. Thank you.
Perfect. Are there any
so
other
much.
questions?
It was super clear. Thank you, Esther.
No, you did great. Thank you so much for, again, taking time out of your schedule to join us. We appreciate it. Although it was a year and a half in the making, we finally got you here on the squares, as we call them. I just want to say thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will get all the information to you via email. Haley Stafford will be sending you that very shortly. Thank you again for joining us. We appreciate it. We will pay attention to what WLC is doing. We've got a lot of great stuff coming up. Hopefully, we'll be seeing you all in person in about 2 months, which we're very excited about. We're rolling out with some in-person events on a smaller scale. So we're looking forward to that. In the meantime, I wish everybody the best. Be safe, be healthy, enjoy the sunshine. Remember to set your boundaries. I did learn a few things today that I'll be setting my boundaries. Becky, I've got a 22-year-old and a 20-year-old. Call me. I got some tips for you. But beyond that, everybody, have a fantastic day. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.